His audience loved him. In fact, he got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame thanks to his fans who raised funds for that to happen. But not the fans of his role as Superman, but the fans of a romantic time-traveling movie that would have him as the protagonist. We're going to talk about that cult movie, unknown to many, in this report. About that and many other things. Let's see how the commitment to social causes led this actor to take such concrete actions as traveling to other countries to participate in mobilizations against persecution and censorship. Or how would he come to support institutions and foundations that would end up helping him when disaster fell upon him? We will talk about how it was that when everyone thought he would never recover, that he was defeated, he made sure to show that there is something more powerful than kryptonite, the willpower. We'll see him launch, rescue, crash, and be revived. Our adventure today is going to take us to the very moment when our hero finished consecrating himself as eternal and traveled to infinity and beyond, which would happen on October 10th, 2004. The day Christopher Reeve died. Exploration 10, my first book, is now available in all bookstores. I leave you the link below so you can get it in physical format and in ebook. But before we continue, I would like you to tell me if you have seen the Christopher Reeve movies and which one is your favorite. I'm not just talking about Superman, obviously, but also about others. Some of you may know about the topic I mentioned at the beginning, while others may not. If you know it, I invite you to leave the name of this movie below to prove that you are a true fan of Christopher Reeve. We will read all the comments, and I invite you to suggest future video ideas. Now let's get started. Superman may be able to do many things, but he can't predict what's going to happen. If Christopher Reeve could have seen the future, would he have said no to the invitation to participate in a competition in Virginia? Since he didn't have the power, he said yes with his usual optimism and energy. It was a show-jumping competition. Rip was good at horse riding. When he rode Buck, his thoroughbred always left everyone in awe with his mastery of the situation. However, that afternoon things did not go as the man had planned. That afternoon he had no chances to show his elegance in riding. That afternoon things would inevitably go wrong. It was the 27th of May 1995, and in the firmament rose an imposing sun. It was a pleasant day. Until the accident took place, Buck stopped abruptly just before performing a triple bar jump. The audience, enthusiastic until a few seconds ago, stifled a scream. Rip had been violently thrown off the animal and had fallen headfirst. After a millisecond, in which there was only silence and the worst omens were felt, everything was screams, sirens, and media gone mad with the news. Hours later, doctors would discover that Rip's first two cervical vertebrae had been fractured. The consequences were that he became quadriplegic and connected to a ventilator. After the family showed up to accompany the shocked and stunned actor, the doctors gave the diagnosis a terrible finish. The worst part was that the paralysis condition was irreversible. They performed a surgery that allowed him to nod and move his head. From the neck down, nothing. The man, who everyone had suddenly seen flying, was left bedridden at just 43 years old. But not only can accidents not be predicted, miracles can't be predicted either. And for many, what happened next was practically just that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's get to know Reeve a little better. The hero of this story wasn't born on a distant planet about to explode, but right in the heart of New York. On the 25th of September 1952, he was christened as Christopher Dolly Reeve. What did explode was his parents' relationship, who when the boy turned 4 years old, decided it was better to abandon the constant disputes and separate. After that, Christopher and his younger brother moved to Princeton, where their mother started a new family. There, the young man made sure all eyes were on him. While it's true that he gained a great reputation for his performance in various sports, such as swimming and ice hockey among others, it's also true that Christopher managed to stand out for something else. His athletic figure and his 6 feet 5 inches height not only shone wearing the Princeton sports team jersey, but also on the stages. Christopher had a great sensitivity for almost any artistic discipline, and soon began to serve as the assistant to the director of the school orchestra. In addition, he sang in a local choir where he honed his baritone voice, spending hours and hours locked away, polishing his tones. But it wasn't music that ultimately elevated him, but the naturalness with which he dared to interpret the most difficult characters in theater classes. At 15, he stepped on stage and knew, upon hearing the applause, that acting was his calling. In 1974, he was selected to study at the prestigious Juilliard School of Art. The other chosen one would become his best friend, Robin Williams. And, by the way, they have a video about Robin Williams uploaded on this channel. So if you haven't seen it, I invite you to search for it as Robin Williams. The Day That, or Robin Williams Magnus, and it will appear the same. I'll leave it at the end, so you can click and go watch it. In that same year, Inmaculado's innate talent and demeanor landed him his first television jobs. Some performances in recognized halls and brief roles in popular films. His first audition for Broadway came quickly, and the boy quickly took on the deserved title of Young Promise. However, despite his rich resume and the abundance of work, money was still scarce in his pockets. He was about to give up on his dreams in those days when he checked with some anguish that the money was not enough for a decent dinner. Then a classified ad came into his hands that would change everything. A casting call was being made for a new movie. Was it an action movie? Was it an adventure movie? It wasn't Superman, the 1978 Superman. It was an expensive blockbuster with a splendid cast. The results? A box office success that soared over all the #1 spots for a few months. However, the project had been close to crashing on more than one occasion. Salkind, one of the film's producers, would tell years later that the idea of bringing Clark Kent's alter ego to the screen came to him after watching the Zorro movie in the cinema. At that moment, the idea of making a movie about someone fighting for good was planted in him. And what better than to shoulder the titanic task of bringing to life a new version of the man with the S on his chest? He was clearly aware from the beginning that the key was to choose the right person to play the Kryptonian. He also knew that it would not be easy. Sylvester Stallone crossed his mind as a possibility. In fact, the actor had shown interest in the matter, but something in Salkind told him that was not the right way. DC Comics approved a couple of green light names for Al Pacino, and Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford, and Clint Eastwood were rejected. What did Salkind say? He said no, they weren't focusing enough, that those were good stars, but they didn't have the necessary charisma for that role. Just as he was about to give up, a young man appeared before him. At that time he was relatively unknown, but it was clear he had strong self-confidence. His name was Christopher Reeve Salkind. He didn't hesitate. It didn't matter that no one knew his name yet. He was sure that this boy was destined to shine. He had him try on the blue suit and red cape. The producer would be amazed. That man, he was simply born to be Superman, although, to be honest, he was missing something. Gain weight. But Salkind knew how to fix it. The English bodybuilder David Prowse, who physically portrayed Darth Vader in the Star Wars of 1977. He was chosen to train Rip, who started eating up to 6 meals a day. In a few months he had gained 18 kilos of muscle. Now the world was his. The first director of the movie had to step down from the project due to his debts with the tax office. Richard Donner then joined the team. Salkind was overjoyed when Marlon Brando, who was at the height of his career with The Godfather and Last Tango in Paris, in 1972 agreed to take on the role of Jor-El, Superman's biological father. However, he didn't make things easy for the movie's producers at first. He asked for a fortune for his screen time, made outrageous suggestions, and was reluctant to follow his lines. On the other hand, Salkind and his team were determined to make the flight scenes, which were crucial to the success of the movie, as realistic as possible. This led to countless problems and postponement of entire days of shooting. And we know that in the entertainment industry, time is equal to money. However, there was one person who, despite the chaos, kept everything from getting out of hand. Rip was not only fully committed to the role of Superman, but he was willing to do whatever it took to make the movie a success. He spent hours hanging from harnesses without complaining, was kind to the press, supported his colleagues when they succumbed to stress, and filled the set with good humor and jokes. Fame would soon knock on his door. Sorry, did I say fame? I meant to say super fame. When he hadn't even had time to plan his future as an actor. Christopher Reeve was already immersed in Superman 2nd, which had a greater impact than the previous one, and this led to Superman 3, both by Richard Lester. It was already being said then that Christopher Reeve would never be able to shake off the character, that this success would bury him alive. Just like what had happened, for example, to Bela Lugosi with Dracula or Adam West with Batman, but that's not what happened. It's true that this identification persisted, but it's also true that the actor declined to star in many successful films. And yet, he did not refuse to participate in the 4th Superman movie, where he also had an active role in the script and production. Plain and simple. Rip had no problem continuing to be Superman, but there was a role outside of the superheroic that the actor accepted. Rip showcased his talent in the classic Somewhere in Time from 1980. A movie in which he played a man who can travel to the past to fall in love with a woman he knows thanks to an old painting. And here we have to take a pause to tell something. The movie has a great peculiarity. It generated an unusual following of fans who in the 90s founded a club that continues to meet annually. In different landscapes that were used as locations in the fiction, in these places they erect monuments that pay tribute to different scenes and organize themed evenings. That unprecedented fervor was also what led them, as we have already told, to be the ones in charge of raising money so that Christopher could enter the Walk of Fame with his own star. But why has it caused and continues to cause such fervor? That remains a mystery. What is not a mystery is that years later Rip would also act in the music video of the Argentine duo Pimpinela, arousing the enthusiasm of the Latin American public. There was no doubt everyone loved Christopher. He, for his part, returned the affection to his followers whenever he could, but his heart belonged to only one person. The 30th of June, 1987. While participating in the Williamstown Theatre Festival, Rip decided to go to a Massachusetts nightclub. There he was dazzled by a singer, and at the end of the show he approached her, who introduced herself as Dana. The woman initially thought the man was a conceited Christopher, however. He persisted and managed to get a date. In it, he made it clear that he was not just an actor committed to the seventh art. There was much more to him. He told Dana that he had traveled to Chile to support 80 artists threatened by dictator Pinochet's death squads. That he collaborated with the Special Olympics by giving talks to raise awareness about the problems of people with disabilities, and that he used to visit hospitals. Since 1982, he had been contributing to the pioneers of the American Paralysis Foundation. Without imagining that 13 years later he would have the same condition as those he defended. There was humility in his words, and Dana couldn't help but fall in love. The girl from New Jersey and the acclaimed New York actor began dating 5 years later. They got married. In 1992 they had a son. For the couple, life couldn't be more beautiful. They loved, admired, and respected each other. Dana loved horses and was fond of horse riding. Christopher, who already had experience with animals, perfected his skills and became an expert rider. Then one day he was invited to participate in a competition in Virginia. And this is where our story returns. At first that idyll was about to turn into a nightmare. After the accident and diagnosis, Rip, whose mind had not suffered the same damage as his body, and at no point saw his cognitive ability reduced, confessed to Dana that he believed the best option was a dignified death. She responded that she would respect any decision he made, but that he should know she would not be by his side. Hope prevailed over anguish, and the family dedicated themselves to readjusting to their new life. One that included constant medical attention, nurses 24 hours a day, and ramps throughout the house. At first, Christopher was depressed, and every morning he wondered if he would be able to endure another day in that state. Little by little, like everything in his life, his perseverance prevailed. He accepted the bad time without complaining, and decided that he not only wanted to live, but to pick up his life right where he had left it. He doubled his investments to help foundations dedicated to paralysis and returned to his passions, determined to show that nothing was going to stop him. In 1996, the actor appeared at the Oscars with his artificial respirator and wheelchair. After a heartfelt and prolonged ovation from those present, he began his speech with a dark humor joke. Then, he emphasized the power of cinema to fight injustices and change the reality of many. Sometime later, he made his debut as a director in a film intended for television that bravely addressed the issue of acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The following year, he would reappear as an actor in The Window Across, by Jeff Blechner, a new version of Alfred Hitchcock's thriller, Rear Window. He also wrote the biography Still Me, whose transcription to disc earned him the Grammy for Best Spoken Album in 1999. Around that time, he created the Christopher Reeve Foundation, a foundation that managed to raise over $130 million for the research of different treatments to improve the quality of life of at least 100,000 people. He traveled the world to meet with scientists, public representatives, businessmen, and philanthropists. In 2002, and after countless hours of physiotherapy, he managed to move his fingers and regain some sensitivity to touch. The doctors were amazed at these small giant progresses. They even said it bordered on the miraculous. In 2004, just as it seemed the worst had passed, his health became complicated again. On October 10th, 2004, Rip passed away after suffering a heart attack. His ashes were scattered to the wind so he could fly one last time. Dana worked with the foundation until August 9, 2005, when she was diagnosed with lung cancer. Would she die a year later? It seemed that the lovers were destined not to spend much time apart. The couple's son wrote himself a letter the day he lost his mother, a letter that said something like this: "I have two pieces of news for you. The bad news is that you're at the lowest point in your life. Did you just say goodbye to your mom? Did she leave just like your dad? But here's the good news. It's the lowest point you can be at. There's no other place to go but up, and that's where you're headed." The same son would be the one who would excitedly celebrate in 2018 upon learning that Jared Chinook, a student who had become paraplegic in 2013, had made medical history by being able to walk 100 meters with the help of a walker, and a pioneering treatment. That same year, a group of neurosurgeons from the University of Louisville reported that 2 of their paraplegic patients had managed to take a few steps, thanks to these rehabilitation sessions and continuous electrical stimulation. That was also the legacy of his father. Today, Christopher is thought of as someone who managed to be stronger than the very Man of Steel who made him famous. Superman, after all, had special abilities thanks to his extraterrestrial origin. Rip, on the other hand, was nothing more than a simple human, but a human with a very clear philosophy. In an interview he had said, "Many of our dreams at first seem impossible, then they seem improbable, but when we summon the will, they become inevitable." Fate had put him to the test and he had not given up. He was able to continue enjoying his profession and his family until the end of his days, without his condition conditioning him. He wrote scripts, participated in events, and even taught his little one to ride a bike. And while it's true that he left us at a very early age, it's also true that he lived those 52 years intensely, and they were enough for him to leave a profound mark on the world he had to inhabit. A world that he perhaps did not save, but to which he granted something more wonderful than salvation. The certainty that everything can be achieved if one is willing to fight. And that's the story of Christopher Reeve. I hope you found it interesting. I want you to comment below. If you've seen his movies, what did you think of Christopher Reeve's Superman movies? Who's your favorite Superman, since we're talking about this superhero? And any extra information you can provide below. I'm going to leave a couple of videos here for you to continue the marathon. Feel free to suggest ideas for future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye. My name is Magnus Mephisto and this was EliaQ.